welcome to Cycling Insights, the podcast brought to you by L'Etape Australia by Tour de France. It is a big podcast this week because the Dauphiné's just finished, the Giro is behind us, and the Tour isn't far away. Simon Gerrans, we've got a lot to get through, including a chat with the guy who gave you, I think, the first bike that you raced on, Phil Anderson.
Yeah, great to chat with Phil. He was such a big part of my racing career. He was the guy who introduced me to competitive cycling as a family friend. So I've got a lot to thank Phil for, and it was really great to hear his stories from back, namely in the '85 season.
It's underestimated how good Phil Anderson was. We'll get a bit of an insight into that when we talk to him. Looking to the future, we'll be catching up with Jensen Plowright, who won a race that you won, the Melbourne to Warrnambool. And as always, we'll have a chat with Spratt. Before we get into those conversations, a couple of the major elements of news so far in the last week or so. Sam Bennett, Quick-Step have said, the Koenig Quick-Step, no spot for you anymore. You keep winning races. We're not going to continue your contract. He's rumoured to be going either back to Bora Hansgrohe or across to Ineos. If you're advising Sam Bennett, where does he go?
I don't think it really matters where Sam Bennett goes. The main thing is he's got to take Morkau with him. Like, you see how well those guys work together. And if the two of them went to Ineos Grenadiers, he would win a bunch of races. If the two of them went to Bora Hansgrohe, again, he would be winning a lot. So I think the most important for Sam is that he keeps his core lead-out team together.
Well, he's in trouble there because the Koenig Quick-Step have just re-signed Michael Morkau. So how much does that tell you that Patrick Lefevre puts value on the guy that you've identified as the number one man?
Well, obviously he sees that as the key factor to any of his sprinters winning. And, Patrick Lefevre is never short on talent. He's going to have other guys coming through that he's identified can fill Sam Bennett's position within the team. Whether Sam decides to go to Ineos or somewhere else, I'm not really sure. But wherever he goes, he's going to get a nice paycheck.
Yeah, he will for sure. I think that Ineos would be a bad move for him in terms of trying to win races because they've got so many GC guys that he might run out of opportunities. A bit like when Viviani was there. He didn't get to ride many Grand Tours.
No, but I think what Ineos Grenadiers have seen over the past few years, it doesn't hurt to get some other results around focusing on the Tour de France because it really takes the pressure off. Because if you're only focusing on the Tour de France and that doesn't go so well, you can have a pretty dry season. Whereas if you've got other riders, the likes of Sam Bennett stepping in there to be able to pick off stages here and there and just keep the name up there of the team and keep the sponsors happy, then I think that sort of counts a lot for your GC riders.
Yeah, it just releases the pressure valve a little bit when your team's actually getting results. Another guy who's just signed an extension to his contract is Ben O'Connor. Now, he's riding for the team that you started your pro career with, AG2R. At the end of last season, he was with the team that's now Quebecer Assos, and they looked like they were going to fold. And their team manager said, go and get a contract wherever you can. And Ben was only signed to 1 year with AG2R. And I'd imagine it was a pretty small contract. And at the time, I thought, that's a good thing that it's only 1 year because he's got the ability to get some really big results. I think he can finish top 10 at the Tour de France. AG2R worked it out pretty quickly and they signed him for another 3.
Yeah, Vincent Lavenu, the general manager at AG2R, is very good at re-signing guys on longer contracts when he sees some talent within his team. I'm really pleased to see Ben. He's stepped it up and he's grasped that opportunity. Like you said, he probably went there on a fairly modest contract, being only 1 year, and Ben did the right thing by taking only 1 year because if he knew he was worth more than he was getting paid, then he wants to be at the end of his contract as quickly as possible so he can renegotiate a new one. And I think AG2R has worked really well for Ben because there's a gaping hole in their climbing talent with guys like Romain Bardet leaving, Pierre Latour leaving as well. Yeah. So he's going to basically have the liberty to do what he wants and do his own races in the mountains.
All right, I'm going to change the batting order on our run sheet and we're going to switch and now talk about the Dauphiné because we've been talking about Ben O'Connor and then we'll take a look back at the Giro d'Italia. So before we move on to Richie Porte, again on Ben O'Connor, for that team, for AG2R, to see him racing so aggressively in a big French race and given the number one in the team, so he was wearing number 71, so he was their team leader, how important is that to that team, seeing O'Connor do what he did in that race?
Well, that's huge because it's their home region of AG2R Le Mondial. They're from Chambéry. The team base is there, so any race in that area of France, they put a lot of emphasis on. But one thing you just highlighted just then to say that Ben O'Connor was number 71 in that team, so they had earmarked him as the team leader ahead of Greg Van Avermaet in that
Yeah.
squad. So that counts for a lot, and that probably counts. Shows us a heck of a lot what they think of Ben within the team.
Yeah, so he'll be making his first appearance at the Tour de France this year, and I can't wait to see what he can do. What I do know about him is he's not overawed by a situation at all. One of the first big international races he did was the Tour of Qinghai Lake in China, and he went there his first overseas race. Wes Salzberger was on the team, a guy who'd ridden the Tour de France, and Ben said to him, "Okay, Wes, I need your support. I'm riding for GC."
It goes to show he doesn't lack confidence, and he's got a very mature head on his shoulders. But another Aussie in the top 10 of the Dauphiné, Jack Haig. So he has really stepped up for Bahrain Victorious. And didn't they have a fantastic Dauphiné as well?
Oh, they had an amazing Dauphiné. There's 8 stages. They won 3 of them. They won the King of the Mountains and they won the points classification. And Jack finished in 5th position overall. That is a team that, to me, 2-3 years ago, externally, they looked dysfunctional. Now they look really functional.
Yeah, and we've just seen a few little glimpses of a team that is working really well together for their team leader. I remember watching a stage in the Tour de France last year where they committed. They threw it down nice and early to try and set Lander up to go for the stage win. It didn't eventuate for them, but just seeing how well the team collaborated, for me, it was signs of really big things to come for Bahrain Victorious.
Jack Haig, what are your expectations for him at the Tour de France? We're going to do a Tour de France preview special later this month, but what would be a good tour for Jack?
What would be a good tour for Jack? So for Jack's first Tour de France, he just needs to get in there, get amongst it, and soak it all up, experience the Tour de France, because the Tour de France is like no other race on the calendar. The pressure is so much greater there. The crowds are so much bigger. The level is so much higher than any other race of the season as well. So for Jack's first tour, I don't think he needs to put too much pressure on himself results-wise. He just needs to get in there and learn and support his team leaders as best he can.
And on the topic of pressure, Richie Porte went into the Criterium du Dauphiné without much pressure. He wasn't the number one. Geraint Thomas wore number 31. Richie wore 36 or 35 or whatever it was. And he stepped up and he got the win in a race that he's been so close to winning a couple of times in the past. It was enormous.
Well, Richie is accumulating a very, very complete Palmares. Now, you look at the fact that he's won Paris-Nice, he's won Romandy, he's won Tour de Suisse, he's won Dauphiné. There's not too many one-week stage races on the calendar that Richie Porte hasn't won to date. And he seems to really thrive when he is not the main focal point of the team. When he's maybe the plan B or the backup option or the co-leader, and there's someone else like a Geraint Thomas in the team shouldering that pressure, Richie just steps up and races at a whole nother level.
Okay, there's no question that Cadel Evans is Australia's greatest Grand Tour rider of all time. He's the only Aussie to have won one. He's the only Aussie to have won the Tour de France. But looking at their CVs between Richie and Cadel, you can make a really strong case that Richie Porte is our best ever one-week stage racer.
I couldn't argue with that. Yeah, 1 week stage races I think has been really Richie's forte throughout his career. Up until last year's Tour de France, where we saw him finish third, he couldn't quite string it together without a really bad day or without some misfortune over the course of 3 weeks. But he showed us last year when he can do that, he's still very competitive over 3 weeks. So it's not a lack of condition. Sometimes it might be a bit of a lack of opportunity or a bit of, mismanaged pressure, something like that really prohibits him performing over 3 weeks. But I tell you what, Ineos Grenadiers having Richie Porte there as a backup plan in the Tour de France is a pretty good option this year.
Yeah, third last year, winner of the Dauphiné, Plan B. It's an incredible team. And I don't know where Richard Carapaz is, who won the Giro a couple of years ago in terms of his form. We'll find out a little bit more soon. But to close out on the Criterium du Dauphiné, we look at the Colombians at the moment in this generation, and I often see lots of Colombians inside the top 10 and think every team needs a Colombian. But you look at the top 20, we had 3 Aussies inside the top 10. Damien Housen was 16th overall, so 4 Australians inside the top 20. This is the most depth we've ever seen, particularly in the mountains, in Australian cycling.
Yes, it was also reflective, I think, in Paris-Nice earlier in the year. It was a similar group of riders all performing really well in the general classification. So moving back sort of 10 years or so, or even longer now, Australia was always known as a powerhouse in sprinting. So many of our professionals at that point in time had come from a track background. Now I think Australians are looked at as more so with depth in GC. Obviously, we have Caleb, we have a couple of standout sprinters, but the depth is really in the GC these days.
Yeah, it is. To close out on the Criterium du Dauphiné, I've got two more questions for you. One of them is about Richie Porte. For Richie winning the race and then leading to the Tour as that number 2 guy, potentially behind Geraint Thomas, how significant is the win in the context of the rest of his career? And what does it do for his confidence going to the Tour?
Well, as far as his confidence going into the Tour, I think his third place last year has probably done a lot more for his confidence going into the Tour de France than the victory in the Dauphiné, for example. Historically, he's won the Tour of Switzerland. He's had some big results leading into the Tour before. So I think it's more so his result in last year's Tour that's going to give him confidence. And as far as his mindset goes, I don't think the out-and-out leader of the Tour de France team at Ineos Grenadiers will have changed. I think it will still be Geraint Thomas. But just knowing that he's going to be there and he's got as good a form at this stage as Geraint and as anybody else who is targeting the Tour de France should put him in really good stead.
One more topic of discussion out of the Criterium du Dauphiné, Sony Corelli. Second, first, second. So any of those little uphill type finishes, he was the man to beat. He got a little unlucky with breakaway. Those 3 second place finishes, Geraint Thomas snuck off the front with a kilometre to go. The other 2 second place finishes, there was a breakaway and he won the sprint finish to finish second. And then he finally got his chance and he won. Is he the unluckiest guy in the pro peloton at the moment in terms of when his birthday falls? For that sort of finish, the start of his career, he's been up against Peter Sagan. And now on those sorts of finishes, he finds himself up against Wout van Aert and Mathieu van der Poel.
Well, I think for any rider's career, you can kind of look and say, okay, they've always had some tough competitors. Sony Corelli, and his name, it makes me think he's in the Mafia, name like that. It's such a cool name, such a cool name. But anyway, Sony Corelli, he performed really well at the Dauphiné. He was probably a little bit unlucky that he didn't have a bit more support in the finishes. He had a very sort of strong GC team around him there. So maybe if he had a bit more of a stronger lead out train, a few of those sort of riders that slipped away in the final may have come back and he would have been sprinting for the win. But there wasn't a very deep sprinters field at the Dauphiné. There's very, very few chances for sprinters there. So I think the fact that he was winning or was winning those bunch finishes each time was kind of to be expected as well.
Yeah, I wish him all the best at the Tour, but he's going to have really tough competition there against the other guys that we just mentioned because the stages that suit him, the stages that suit Van Aert and Van der Poel, it's going to be exciting. We'll see how they go and whether they can get that train organised. So that's closing out the Dauphiné. Richie Porte winning, becoming the second Aussie to win that race. A huge result. Congratulations to Richie. Giro d'Italia. We've got a week's breathing space back from the Giro d'Italia. Egan Bernal going out the winner. In many respects, Gero, that's expected. But I think that going to the Giro was actually a decision that put more pressure on Egan Bernal than if he had have gone to the Tour de France.
Well, I think as a GC rider, if you've won the Tour de France, it doesn't matter what Grand Tour you're lining up in, there's always going to be pressure. But I think there would have been extra pressure on him in this year's Giro d'Italia because he was the out-and-out leader, in my opinion, of the Ineos Grenadiers team, which were the powerhouse team in the race. So he was expected to deliver, and with that comes a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and I think that if he had have gone to the Tour, there would have been that it didn't work out for him last year. You're not the defending champion. Pogačar and Roglic, it's the Slovenian national championships just about in terms of the race for yellow. There would have been less pressure on him at the Tour. But at the Giro, anything other than a win would have been perceived as a failure. But if he had have gone to the Tour and even finished third, that would have been classified as a success. So I think it tells us a bit about his character and his ability to deal with pressure.
Yeah, and you know what? Watching particularly a little bit more closely the last week of the race, I was very impressed with how he handled that pressure. He didn't get hot-headed. He didn't chase down attacks that maybe were going to put him in the red or put him in a position of blowing. He stuck with his team. He had a super strong Daniel Martinez supporting him in the mountains there, and he just rode to the strength of his team, and he did exactly what he had to do to win overall.
He's skipping the Tour de France. He's skipping the Olympics. His next focus will be the Vuelta to España. If he wins the Vuelta, that will put him in a select club that will make him just the 8th rider in history to have won all 3 Grand Tours. That would be a huge accomplishment.
That would be a massive accomplishment. But I think now he's probably going to be lining up in the Vuelta with even more pressure than what he had at the start of the Giro d'Italia. Because, like you said, it is a very elite club, and he's going to be very well positioned to take that Vuelta title. And I'm excited about the Tour of Spain already.
Yeah, and let's hope that he deals with the COVID. He and his girlfriend have returned a positive test to COVID, and who knows what the impacts of that are. So fingers crossed that he does make a full recovery. But Harry Sweeney, who rode really well, another Aussie who rode really well on the Dauphiné, he missed out on the Classics this year because of COVID. And jokingly, after he survived one of the hillier stages in the front group, he laughed that maybe COVID expanded his lung capacity.
Found the silver lining, which is great.
He did. So the Bike Exchange team and Simon Yates, how did you rate that performance?
Well, Simon Yates was clearly one of the strongest guys in the third week of the Giro. We saw him win his stage there. We saw a really committed Bike Exchange team supporting him and bringing the brakes back for him to go for those stage wins. But it didn't look like he had his form right. I don't know whether he had a little bout of sickness mid-race or something like that, but he definitely had a few off days by the look of it around the middle of the race, which cost him time and, the top step on the podium at the end of the day. So, yeah, Simon Yates, we've seen him come into the Giro blistering hot form. We've seen him come to the Giro underdone, and this year it didn't quite work out for him either. So I'm not quite sure what to think of Simon Yates' performances.
Well, Matt White has said that he's taking Simon Yates to the Tour de France, not to race for the general classification, but to go hunting stage wins.
Well, obviously, Bike Exchange, they've changed their focus again at the Tour de France, and they're going to go for stage wins. We're going to line up with Michael Matthews there and Simon Yates going for stages as well. I think Esteban Chavez, he'll probably also be looking for stages in the mountains, so they're going to have plenty of options.
Yeah, they'll be active, no doubt, throughout the Tour de France this year. Another big talking point coming into the Giro and exiting the Giro was Remco Evenepoel as the number 1 man at the Koenig Quick-Step, not having raced for 9 months, making his first ever appearance in a Grand Tour, and he was the leader, and they had João Almeida in the team who'd finished 4th overall the year before.
Well, how would you feel if you're Almeida? He led the Giro for around 2 weeks last year, and finished in 4th overall, and to line up alongside a young Belgian kid with really no track record in a Grand Tour, who hadn't raced for 9 months, to forego team leadership to Evenepoel. It would have been, probably a little bit upsetting for Almeida.
Yeah, for sure. And we saw him get called back a couple of times to support Evenepoel, particularly on the stage across the gravel roads in Tuscany. And you could see he was doing what he was told, but he was doing it reluctantly. He looked a little frustrated, and understandably so.
Yeah, well, he's probably a rider that I wouldn't be surprised to see leave the Koenig Quick-Step in the near future.
He's leaving. He's leaving at the end of the year, and I think he's only 22. So he's been 4th in the Giro, and he rode really well this year despite losing a bunch of time supporting Evenepoel. He lost some of his own time as well, though, on stage 4. But at 22 years of age, it's a guy who's almost saying, write me a check. What team picks him up? Where would you like to see? What team would you go to if you were in his shoes at 22 and you're thinking, I can win a Grand Tour?
You go to the team that is going to support you the best. And funnily enough, I think it's Almeida. He has the agent that represents a bunch of the Portuguese footballers.
He does.
So his agent is going to know how to negotiate a very nice contract. But the most important thing is the support and the opportunity he's going to get at this point in his career, because he's shown he has the capabilities of winning over 3 weeks.
Yeah, I reckon there's a lot of team managers are nervous about dealing with that agent, because he's going in with different expectations from what cycling delivers, given that he's looked after some of the biggest football players in the world. I think he manages Ronaldo.
Oh, yeah, there you go. I think if anyone knows how to negotiate a nice contract, it's Almeida's agent. Another little bit of change of leadership that we saw through opportunity in the Giro d'Italia was Damiano Carrutzo stepping up to finish 3rd on GC. I was so pleased for him.
Everybody seemed to be pleased for him. I've never met the guy. I've only commentated on him. I've never even done an interview with him. But what I found really fascinating after his stage victory and his first ever World Tour win, and 33 years of age, was the outpouring of love for Damiano Carrutzo on social media from current professionals and retired pros who haven't even been teammates with him.
Well, I was teammates with Caruso my last year competing at the BMC racing team. And I still had his number on my phone, shot him a message when I saw his stage win and said, congratulations. He was back to me within a second. Like, he's that kind of guy. He's going to acknowledge every bit of praise that he gets. And he's such a tireless worker. So often, I think it was only his second or third victory, his stage win in the Giro, which goes to show a rider of that kind of strength, that kind of capabilities, not having won much.
Yeah.
He's laid in the line for his teammates consistently, and everybody really respects that.
Yeah, it's only his second ever win and his first at World Tour level. So to think that you can finish top 10 in Grand Tours and not have won any World Tour races is extraordinary. And then he ended up finishing in second place overall. What does that tell you, though, about the difference between the pressure of being the protected rider from the start versus that opportunity that pops up midway through a race?
Well, every rider is different, I think, in that respect. Some riders really thrive on the attention of being team leader, and they step up with the pressure because they know everybody's there laying it on the line for them. Other riders just crumble with that sort of attention, and they really like just flying under the radar and just going about their business and let their legs really do the talking. So everybody's different, but it's for sure Caruso, he doesn't like all that attention. He actually went to the Bahrain, at the time, Bahrain Merida team to support Vincenzo Nibali. They're quite close from their time together at Liquigas. And I think it was Nibali who asked him to come across to Bahrain. Obviously, Nibali moved on, and Caruso's still there. These days, more so in a working role for Mikel Landa, but still getting the opportunities.
Yeah, I'd like to see those two go together to the Vuelta. Because of the crash that Mikel Landa had, I think the injuries will be too significant for him to be ready for the Tour. Caruso will be perhaps too fatigued to then go to the Tour. If they could both go together as a two-pronged team to the Vuelta, that would be a really interesting combination.
That would be really good.
Yeah.
Another disappointing crash that we saw in the Giro, Caleb Ewan.
Well,
The
Caleb
crash out.
of the Tour, what I found infuriating with Caleb was the hypocrisy of the reaction to him abandoning the race. In terms of Mario Cipollini never finished the Tour de France, but the Italians didn't say that he was disrespecting the Tour. Eddie Merckx came out and he slammed Caleb Ewan for abandoning the Giro d'Italia, but said nothing about the riders that were pulling out after stage 13 that were sprinters. And Eddie Merckx was kicked out of the Giro d'Italia on one occasion for a positive doping test. So Caleb pulled out because he had a knee injury, and it was a genuine knee injury. There was an issue with the cleat on his shoe, and he respected the race enough to go there to be the best sprinter and win two stages.
Yeah, I think maybe why he was copping so much flack from all those sort of all the champions in the sport, really, and so much of the armchair experts was because he crashed and he abandoned, where everyone said, "Oh, the crash was just an excuse." He would have, if he had to finish the stage and exited alongside many of the other sprinters did in the race, maybe it wouldn't have grabbed so much attention.
Well, Caleb Ewan will go to the Tour de France, and he will be the man to beat on the flat sprint finishes. I can't wait to see him in action there, up against Sam Bennett, and who else will go there to challenge those two. That closes out our chat on the Criterium du Dauphiné and the Giro d'Italia, a couple of big events for Australian cycling. Cycling Insights is brought to you by L'Etape Australia by Tour de France. L'Etape Australia is the only Tour de France event in Australia and provides riders of all levels with the thrill of riding on fully closed roads, just like at the Tour. I've been part of the event since 2016, and it's always a highlight of the season, just after the Tour itself, perhaps. Join me in Kiama in November to experience the Tour de France atmosphere right here in Australia. For more information, visit letapeaustralia.com. It's LETAPE Australia.com. Time for a chat with Spratt. Amanda Spratt, one of Australia's big hopes for the Olympic Games. Let's hear from her now. Okay, Spratty, keep in mind, I'm in Melbourne. We're back in lockdown. We're at around about 150 days worth of lockdown throughout the COVID pandemic. Make me jealous. Where are you?
I almost don't want to tell you, Matt, but I'm in Livigno in the Italian mountains in the famous mecca for cyclists for altitude training. So here, in the northern part of Italy, it's at 1,800 meters in the valley here. beautiful part of the world. It's sunny, still snow on the mountains, not far from Stelvio Pass. So I might say a little bit better than a Melbourne lockdown right now.
Okay, well, that's enough. All the best to Amanda Spratt for the rest of the season. That's all I can handle. That sounds fantastic. It's a pretty big block coming up for you. After the training camp in Livigno, you're off to Le Course by the Tour de France, which is at the start of the Tour itself over in Brest. What are your ambitions for that one?
Excited. Yeah, I haven't done Le Course. I didn't do it last year, so it's exciting to be back at that race. Different from the original course. They had to change the date to a day earlier. But I've seen the course. It looks very punchy. I think there's 2,000 meters of elevation. So I think it's going to be a really aggressive race for us and a small group and plenty of opportunities there. So I won't have raced for a while. It'll be coming off Livigno, coming off altitude camp. So definitely using it as a hit out. But it's right before my big goal of the Giro, Rosa and Olympics. So I expect the form to be good, and Grace Brown will be there. It's certainly a course that can suit her. So I think it's going to be exciting for Australian viewers.
Is it the A team for Bike Exchange?
Yep, that's always the A team.
That's always the A team.
No, I think we're going to have a very strong team there for that course as well. So I think it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, some people come into not having raced much better for it, and others they need a little bit of racing. We look at Richie Porte recently. He went to the Dauphiné, I think, with about 16 to 17 days worth of racing in his legs. Are you somebody who needs the racing, or you're better going in fresh?
Not always. I think I can train really well together, and certainly we've seen in previous years. Normally, always my Giro build-up has been coming to Livigno, and then I've always been in very good shape in the Giro. So I'm quite confident in that. I've never done like a sort of one-day race into Giro, but I think, regardless. I think a lot of riders haven't raced. We had the Tour of Britain cancelled. That's normally the race people would do in June. There have been some other smaller races in Switzerland and Belgium. So I think, everyone's in a similar position. And I think, Le Course, it's a really attractive course this year, and I already know there are a lot of top riders really going there and getting that. So it's kind of the final one-day race hit out that we'll get before the Olympic Games as well. So I know people are using it as sort of, that practice run for the Olympic Games.
Because of the amount of coverage that it gets, is it the second biggest one-day race this season after the Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge race, and you're right. It gets broadcast across the world. We know that everyone, sort of that race, everyone really wants to race as well. And we've just had the exciting news that we are going to have the Tour de France next year, so we know it's going to get bigger. It's an exciting race, and just the whole buzz around the Tour de France as well.
What was the reaction, not just for you personally, but you personally, and then everybody else in the women's peloton about the fact that there will be a tour for you next year?
Yeah, exciting, really exciting. And I think in some ways it's easy to say, finally at last, it's finally happening. But I think the other side of it is just really embracing that it is actually going to happen and being really positive about it. And I think it's placed after the men's Tour de France, which I think is in the week after, I believe. So I think in some ways people say it should be on at the same time, but I think it's actually great that it's in the week after. It means that we will get the coverage. I hope that, broadcasters and crews and this kind of thing can stay that extra week and really show our race and show it to the world. And I know I was part of a meeting recently about, the broadcast of women's races. And this is a race that will be broadcast around across the world, and people will see it. And everyone knows what the Tour de France is, even if you're not really involved in cycling. And, that's always the question we get asked, do you race the Tour de France? And it's going to be great to finally say yes.
Yeah, I think it is better that it comes after the Tour rather than runs in parallel with it. I'm firmly of the view that we need, a Tour of Flanders, men's and women's, Roubaix, men's and women's. But I think for the Tour de France, if they coexisted at the same time, the women's race would get lost in terms of the overall coverage because it's trying to build. And I hope that off the back of the men's Tour de France and then the women's tour starting on the last day of the men's race, that is the launching pad, and people come out of the tour and go, we want more tour. And then they watch the next one.
Yeah, and I think so. And I think you're right. I think also with the coverage, I don't think people want to give up, parts of the Tour de France to watch the women's race necessarily. I mean, it's such a traditional event and people enjoy to be able to watch the whole coverage. So I think it is giving us center stage in that week. And if it's done well, then people will come and people will watch it. And we've seen that with races that are just exclusively a women's race, that if it's done well and people see the racing, they see it's exciting and they will come out and cheer for us. So that's exciting.
Which the Giro Rosa is. That's exclusively the women's race, and that's your next big target after Le Course. It starts a week after Le Course. I think it's the 2nd of July that it starts.
Yeah, the Friday after Le Course.
Yeah. So, okay, what's going to happen?
I'm very excited about the Giro this year. I think they've just released the course. It's a new organisation that actually only took over the Giro in March, and they've renamed it the Giro Donna. So their focus is on promoting women's cycling rather than just promoting pink jersey. So they really want to develop the women's race over a number of years and really turn it into that sort of big Grand Tour as well. They've just released the course, as I said. It's looking much more like a Giro of 2 and 3 years ago. With you've got the long teams time trial, we've got an uphill individual time trial. We have 2 really key Giro stages, which will be 2 mountaintop finishes, 10 and a 14 kilometer climb. So I think for me personally, it's really exciting because that's in the Giros that have been shaped that way. I've been on the podium twice, so
Yeah,
I was really excited when they announced that. And knowing I'm here in Livigno now with those kind of climbs around, and my training is all really tailored towards that. So yeah, really excited. I think for our team as a whole, it's going to be an exciting course.
what about that
time
time
trial's
trial?
uphill, but I mean it's uphill, but it's not. It's Giro, so I say it's uphill, but it's not too uphill. So I think it starts off a bit flatter and then it sort of climbs into it. It does finish up at altitude, but I think for Australians, I think someone like Grace Brown, she can do a really strong time trial there, and I'm sure she'll be really targeting that stage.
Do you prefer the idea of an uphill time trial versus a flat one?
Probably for me, yes.
Yeah.
Like I look at it and think, it's not quite hard enough. Like, it should be a bit more uphill.
Have you spoken to Sarah Roy about this?
No, Sarah, I avoid that topic with Roy. We did discuss the Giro course yesterday, and we both agreed it's better because it's a bit more gives opportunities to more riders. Like for example, last year you'd see some of the parkours and you'd say, that's pretty flat, but then they'd always put a 1 or 2 kilometer climb at the finish. Whereas this year it is legitimately, we have the team's time trial, we have the uphill time trial, we have a really flat day with a flat finish.
Yeah.
And then we have, the sort of more all-rounder courses. So I think it's a nicely built course this year.
And how's the morale within the team? Because we've seen Bike Exchange getting some pretty good results this season. Are you influenced at all by seeing the men's team get good results and then the 2 teams coming together at any stages throughout the season?
Yeah, I think we always get a buzz when we see the men's team get a good result. And we have like a big WhatsApp group with everyone from the organisation on it. So, if anyone gets a good result, there are always comments from male riders, men's staff, women's riders, staff. So you feel like it is really one team and people are really appreciating what others are doing. And it's always, motivating to see that. So it brings up the morale in the team. And I know, we've just been building and lifting. We've had quite a few new riders in the team this year. So I think it has taken that little bit extra to sort of get used to racing with each other. And you saw in Belgium in the classics by the end, like the team were really performing and gelling well together. And we saw the same in the Spanish races in Burgos as well, that everyone just has their role and a plan. And it's really nice just to come together and commit to it like that.
Yeah, and just on the men and women's team coming together, I think that's been one of the big steps forward in the way the teams have been selling it. I saw some pictures from a training camp with Jumbo-Visma recently, and it was part of their Tour de France team and part of their Giro Donna team. They were at the training camp together, and I think that sells a really good message about being one team.
Yeah, I think so, and I think everyone can benefit from that as well. And it's the men are following the women's races, and we're here in Livigno now, and we have most of our Giro team here, but also some of the male riders are here as well, and they're getting in touch and asking, what do we have for training tomorrow? Do you want to catch up? And that's really nice, and that's when you feel like everyone's here. We were last together maybe in Oliva in Spain in January, or maybe at the classics, but there's sort of that mutual respect and wanting to be part of a team together.
Yeah, I think it's working. It's working really well. I can't wait for the course. I actually don't know if I'm going to get to commentate it or not. We commentated on it last year. I haven't seen my own schedule. So assume that I am. What am I looking for? What am I looking for?
An aggressive race. I think it's an open race. I think you're just going to be looking for a really aggressive race. The course, it's not super technical, but as I said, there are a lot of punchy, steep climbs. You kind of think Marianne Vos when you see some of those climbs. So we could see a Marianne Vos type attack.
I think Vos for most courses, though.
Yeah, that's a valid point. So certainly one for her. But I mean, the most exciting thing this year, I think there's only been one or two riders that have won more than one World Tour race or stage. So
Yeah.
the talent is really spread across. So it's unpredictable. I mean, it's hard to sort of predict exactly what's going to happen in a race these days.
All right. Well, I can't wait. Good luck. Enjoy Livigno. Don't send any pictures. Close down the social media. We don't want to know about it. Actually, maybe we do. It can give us a little bit of hope. Spratty, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Matt.
Giro, for Spratty, she's inside 50 days out from the Olympic Games. For you, your preparation towards the Olympics, how much of an influence was that on the other races that you were riding before you got to the Games?
Well, the Olympic Games was always at a bit of an awkward time of the season on the professional calendar because it always felt just after the Tour de France. And depending on how close it was to the Tour de France has a really big impact on your preparation for the Olympics. In 2008 was my first Olympic Games. There was 2 or 3 weeks, I think, after the tour where we actually had the opportunity to recover a bit from the tour, do a little block of training and go into the Olympic Games feeling really good. My next Olympic Games was in London and it was only, I think, 6 days or 5 days after the tour finished and I was fatigued. I hadn't recovered from the Tour de France and I felt like my performance in London was a little bit lackluster because of that.
Well, lackluster. You went to Olympic Games. I'd take that any day of the week. One of the people that influenced you to get your career started, as we look at Richie having won the Criterium du Dauphiné over the weekend, the first Aussie to win that race was way back in 1985, Phil Anderson, and he played a huge role in getting you started on the bike.
Yeah, Phil, such a phenomenal person in Australian cycling. He's an OAM. There are not too many Australian cyclists who have an OAM that didn't win an Olympic gold medal. So, it's great to hear a few of Phil's stories. A few surprises in there for me, talking about his most memorable victory. One I wasn't expecting. But yeah, so good to hear Phil. And tell you what, he's still looking pretty fit.
Here he is, Phil Anderson. So we're now joined, Simon, by the first Aussie to win the Criterium du Dauphiné. And on this podcast, we don't have any visual, but we've got a visual of Phil Anderson. And Phil, I see a pile of junk behind your shoulder. Is that the Dauphiné trophy that I see?
Yeah, it's not on the top of the pile, but it's in there amongst quite a few others. Sort of, it's in the foundation of some of my results, I guess.
Where does it rate?
It's pretty high. 85 was a very good year, and back then the Dauphiné and the Tour of Switzerland were 1 week apart. So actually, and in that 1 week, I actually we cut that TUI's ad, you might remember from years ago, and so I did the Dauphiné, the TUI's ad, then went to the Switzerland, and I ended up winning Switzerland as well. So it was a big year for me.
So on paper, Phil, 85 was your best season. Is that how you see it in your eyes?
Yeah, no, it was the last of my good results in the Tour de France. I mean, I did win a stage in '91, which was a bit of a renaissance for me. But 85, when you look at the the overall results of the year, it was a pretty big year, and so yeah, I'd possibly consider that my best year.
Yeah. These days, Phil, there's a couple of days overlap between the Dauphiné and the Tour of Switzerland, so you can't physically ride both races. When you won the two, you said there was a week in between. How much recovery time was there between Swiss and the Tour?
There was roughly, I think it was 10 days. So you go straight from there to obviously from Australia would do the nationals, but the Europeans would do the nationals, and then it would be straight to the Tour. So yeah, it was a different era. Like, you just look at what riders are doing now, their programs. We used to race a lot more than what the riders are now.
Well, you look, Richie Porte coming into the Criterium du Dauphiné, Phil, he had 16 days of racing leading into the Criterium du Dauphiné, which he won over the weekend. How many days of racing do you think you did per year?
16 days a week, mate. But no, I think by the end of the year, by the end of the season, we'd have roughly 100 to 120 days of racing a year. So, by this time of the year, you'd possibly have 40 or 50 days. We quite often did a grand tour before before the Tour de France. You do the Giro or the Vuelta, because the Vuelta used to fall before the Giro. So yeah, a lot more racing back then in preparation.
When you won the Dauphiné in '85, you were with the Panasonic team, which was the power team of your career. It was what we see Ineos today. That was Panasonic then. And you finished first and second. It was you and Stephen Rooks. Stephen was in second position. What was the dynamic like within the team with you as the foreigner on that squad and the team leader?
Look, it was a lot different than French teams. They embraced having other nationals in the team. And yeah, I mean, there was always pressure because we had such a good team. Giro would have experienced this in his latter years with Green Edge. You always had to keep your edge. You were only good as your last race. But geez, I remember sitting back in Australia, like I always used to, because with Panasonic we didn't have training camps like some of the other teams. But I remember sitting back in Australia doing my training around Jamison. And looking at the early results, this is in February still, even January, and seeing my team is already winning in Europe, and I was get over there. And by the time I got there, the team would have only had about 10 days of racing, but they would have won just about every race there. So you're stepping into a team which has been winning everything. Always pressure. Pressure like that isn't bad. Wasn't a bad thing for me. I seem to do okay under that sort of under that circumstance.
Well, I was thinking for a second there. There's a number of similarities between yourself and Richie Porte. The fact that obviously you were the first Australian to win the Dauphiné up until just yesterday, because we're recording this on the Monday morning following the Dauphiné. But Richie seems like a guy who really performs when the pressure's not on him, when it pressure's on other leaders within the team. How did you find that within Panasonic? Did you find when there was maybe attention on Rooks, then that gave you the opportunity to step up as well?
I think it was a bit different than Richie's situation. You look at sort of Richie's pathway that he's taken. He's gone to teams where he's been sort of like the outstanding leader, and he's kind of gone to do Ineos. Well, to me, it appears he's gone there with less pressure. There's less expectation that he's going to be there as a leader, and he's gone to this year's Dauphiné with Gerd Thomas, as equal leaders, and whether Richie floundered or not, I don't think there was an expectation that he was going to win it going into it. He was sort of a fallback, but Gerhard obviously won his stage, and if I reckon if Richie wasn't in that position, I didn't see the final stage, but I have a feeling that Gerhard would have won it. He would have gone for it.
For you, Phil, after winning the Dauphiné, then Swiss, and with Panasonic, heading towards the 1985 Tour de France, you were one of the big favourites. What's that pressure like, and how was it for you heading into the Tour and your own belief as to whether you could or couldn't win it?
So it was my fourth Tour de France. And you look at the results I'd got coming into that year. I was possibly one of the more winningest riders, not just on the team, but in the peloton at that stage. So I'd possibly and winning Dauphiné in the Switzerland, I was going in as one of the favourites. The pressure was there, but it was the pressure was there at other races as well, and I seemed to do okay under pressure. Unfortunately, I don't always deliver. I mean, I came fifth in the end. I'd come fifth before in the Tour de France in '82, so it was no better than my result on Peugeot. But I consider myself I was more happy on the Panasonic team. I didn't let the pressure really bother me. I just got on with the job, and when you fail to deliver in something like that, I mean, it's a long way between coming fifth and delivering a win at the Tour de France. You just move on. You got to move on, and we spoke a little bit earlier about numbers of days racing. When you finish one race today and then you've got another race next week, whereas the riders now, they might have 4 weeks before their next event. So there's less pressure. I mean, the Tour de France only one Tour de France, so you've got to wait a year. But, the week after the Tour de France, you got San Sebastian, and then you go on to, other races sort of lead into the World Championships in Montreal or different events around the world. So I didn't really let the pressure bother me too much.
Well, Phil, like you said, you had a huge number of race days every year. You had some, incredible results, namely in the 85 season. But for you, throughout your sort of, 15-year professional career, what was your probably most memorable victory of all your results?
You have different wins through your career, and they're everyone is different, and everyone is special in one way or another. Whether it's a comeback or the prestige or or whether it's a club race. Every race is special. Every win is special. But we said 85 was a very good year. I won a heap of races. At the end of that year, I was one of the top riders in the world, and then suddenly I came down with an arthritic problem with my back, and I had to go back to Australia. I had this this sort of all my joints were very stiff and a lot of pain, and I had no idea what it was. So I started going around to different doctors, specialists, trying to find out what this was, trying to get it diagnosed. And it wasn't actually diagnosed until I was just about to head back to Europe for the next season. And I hadn't done the training, or I'd done some training, but it was very uncomfortable. And so eventually I had it diagnosed, and I went into some treatment for it, which is basically just some medication. And but it was very tough at the start of the year. Coming into the next season as world number 2 rider behind Sean Kelly, and having to face, and I was leader of this the Panasonic team, one of the highest paid riders in the world, and everybody just gave me shit. I mean, the press gave my team shit, because they just what's going on with Skippy? He can't even get on his bike. He's not doing the classics. What is it? And so, of course, they wanted to renegotiate my contract, kind of like what Confidence did with Lance, because suddenly I couldn't perform my duty. But anyway, I got through it, and then ended up doing the Tour de France, and sort of, I think Tour of Switzerland was my first race back. So it was only like a month out from the Tour de France. And yeah, I'd won the Tour of Switzerland the year before, and here I was. I still did okay. I think I got second in the most difficult stage that year in the Tour of Switzerland in 86 up in the mountains. But then did the tour, and my form slowly but surely came along, improved. And then finally we got to the second last classic, which was Paris Tours. And I got away in the end of it and ended up winning in Bourges, or where it was, in Tours. And so for me, that winning that after having such a difficult year, and I think that was my only win, or just a few wins. And of course, I managed to renegotiate my contract and everything with Post, and made him pay back every dollar he didn't pay for me that he held back, due to my illness. So for me, that winning in Tours was very, very special.
Phil, that is awesome. I didn't know the backstory behind that in 86 and winning Paris Tour. That's not the race I would have picked, because you've got an incredibly long list of other races to pick from. Congratulations on being the first Aussie to win the Criterium du Dauphiné. You now have to open up the club doors, because Richie Porte joins you as an Aussie to have won the Criterium du Dauphiné. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Matt and Simon.
So there's Phil Anderson. Simon, you and I had the benefit of having a chat to him and having actual visual as opposed to just the audio that we have on the podcast. 63 years of age. He's a chance to win a stage at this year's Tour de France. How fit does he look?
Well, I think he's probably done more miles this year than a lot of guys who will be lining up in the Tour de France. Maybe not quite so many race days, but definitely plenty of kilometres.
Yeah, I was down on the Great Ocean Road a few years ago doing a ride with a bunch of footballers, and I saw some guy running towards us about 15 k's out of Apollo Bay. It was Phil Anderson running with his dog.
The dog was probably looking pretty fatigued too, I imagine.
The dog was exhausted. Well, from a historical piece in Australian cycling, as always in this podcast, we do one to watch. One to watch is Jensen Plowright. Well, Jensen, before we start to talk about the background and how you got into cycling and so on, I want to get to the nub of the issue in 2021. Why is it that the best sprinter in the leading group at the end of a 260-kilometre bike race decides to attack solo with a K to go?
Well, I am a unique human and I don't always follow the rules. And I went a little bit crazy probably, and I always do. And I was aggressive in the race for the last 30k, and I continued that all the way to the line. Should have probably have taken it down to the sprint, being my strong point, but what a way to win it.
Oh, it's a beautiful way to win the race. When you look back at the honour roll of people who've won that race, like Simon Gerrans, David McKenzie's been a winner of that race, there's been international stars win it. What does it mean to you to win the Melbourne to Warrnambool?
Well, I probably don't, probably hasn't sort of, it'll mean more to me the older I get, I think. It'll probably sink in a bit more, but being young, I don't know the history of it as well. I've only raced it once. I've only experienced it once. I haven't. So I think as I get older, I'll appreciate the race a bit more. And but it is pretty incredible to have on the Palmares, and something I think every Australian cyclist wants.
What was your thought as you went across the finish line and you had won it, not in your usual fashion, but with that late attack to break away solo?
I think it was just disbelief. It's something I wanted to do at the start of the day, and probably for the few months leading up to it, and to actually complete and do that for the first time, that was unreal. Yeah, I probably said in post-race interviews, felt on top of the world, and the adrenaline and the excitement that you get winning any bike race, it was just ecstatic.
It had been a pretty big couple of months for you. You went to the national championships on the track. You won a gold medal in the Omnium. So how does it rate against some of your success on the track when you measure it up to a race that goes for, 6+ hours?
Well, the track races, they're cool. But they're so much shorter, and then you might get 4 races in that championships in the week. So you get 4 shots at getting that national championship. But a one-day race once a year, we even missed. It got delayed as well. So that just like adds to it. It's like the Olympics every 4 years. The time in between races, I think, makes it more special.
Speaking of the Olympics, where do they sit on your agenda of career objectives?
Quite high. Tim will be pleased to know. It is something I strive to do, and that's why I'm here in Adelaide, training with the AIS in the Podium Potential Academy. And I've been training a little bit with the Podium boys, the guys going off to the Olympics, and they're incredible, and I'd love to be just like them.
So going back to the start, where did it all start for you? What was the inspiration to take up cycling, and how did it all get rolling? What club did you ride with, etc.?
I started off riding on the Great Victorian Bike Ride, which you'd know and may have done. And then I joined the Hawthorn Cycling Club and just did that junior program on the road. Didn't really take up racing until bottom age 15, and I was very, very much a Hubbard for a few years until I reached probably under 19s when I took it quite seriously, and it's propelled me to where I am today.
Just having a little bit of an issue with the audio breakup, but that'll all work out all right. When you look at current Australians, when you look at current Aussies in the pro peloton or some from the past, and you had to introduce yourself as, I'm kind of like a mix of this guy and that guy, which rider would define you the most of the Aussies that have had plenty of success overseas?
Oh, it's a tricky one. Not nearly as quick as Caleb, and probably not that good at climbing, but I can get over some small climbs. Caden's probably quite a similar build to me, and in the way that he races. But yeah, I'd love to be as quick as Caleb one day.
Lots of people do.
Yeah.
So outside of the Olympic Games, what are your ambitions then on the road? I assume that from success, hopefully for you on the track, perhaps in Paris in 2024, what are your ambitions then on the road?
Probably, well, I just want to make it pro first. I think that's the first goal. And then when I make it there, I'll reassess and aim for particular races. And I'd love to do a Paris-Roubaix and a Flanders and all those classics. A bit like the Warney, really, those ones. And then eventually, hopefully, Tour de France.
Awesome, mate. Well, having a couple of issues with the audio breaking up.
Oh dear.
I'll be watching your career pretty closely as I have been from the start. But you're following some pretty good company on the Warrnambool Honour Roll, plus on this One to Watch podcast. You're following the likes of Luke Platt, Ruby Roseman Gannon. So you're off to a good start at the very least.
Yeah, I'm stoked to be on it, really. Means I'm heading in the right direction, I think.
Awesome, mate. All the best.
Cheers.
Well, Garo Jensen this year, he won the Melbourne to Warrnambool in his first attempt at the race. He's a guy who's got great results on the track, winning national titles, and on that sort of long list heading towards the Olympic Games in Paris for the team's pursuit squad. How significant a stepping stone for a guy like that is winning the Melbourne to Warrnambool?
Well, I think it's a very important victory for Jensen because it shows how complete he is as a bike rider. Like you said, he's on the cusp of the Australian track team. Yet he's winning 260 kilometer one day races as well, and attacking in the final and winning solo. Not resting on his sprint, not sort of backing himself in that scenario. He's putting it out there. He's throwing on the line, and he's winning big. So it's really good to see.
Yeah, I was commentating on the race, and when I saw him attack with 1 kilometre to go, I thought, this is madness. He's the best sprinter in the group. Just wait.
Well, yes, and I'm sure his director sportif in the team car would have been thinking, what is he doing?
Brilliant. So I'm looking forward to watching the progress of Jensen Plowright's career. And one of the challenges with COVID, Garo, is that he's getting limited opportunities to race overseas. In fact, none, really, over the last 18 months or so. Is it worth a World Tour team potentially taking a punt on a guy who has never raced in Europe before?
Well, we're seeing that happen more and more, actually, with riders basically turning professional or getting offered World Tour contracts without a track record of racing in Europe. A guy we spoke about much earlier in the year quite a lot, Luke Platt, Same deal. I don't think he's raced in Europe on the road. Yet I think there was, probably about 20 World Tour teams lining up for his signature at the start of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. So my view on Jensen Plowright is that across at Lotto Soudal, they've got to commit to Caleb Ewan for a few years. They have to build a good train around him. They've already got another Aussie, Harry Sweeney, on the team. They've got Jesper de Boost as a key part of the lead out. Jensen Plowright is a guy that Lotto Soudal should take a punt on give him minimum wage 2-year contract, and he can be a really important part of Caleb's career.
Yeah, and I think that would be a great team for him to go to. They've got a great history of Australians in the team, a great history of Australian sprinters. And if they're prepared to develop him over the next few years, Jenkins can get in there. He could learn a heck of a lot from Caleb and the team management at Otto Soudal. I think that would be a great team for him.
Watch this space, because if he sees a wet, tricky corner with 200 to go, Jensen Plowright's eyes light up. Rapid fire questions, Gero. We're kicking it off with some inspired by the Giro d'Italia. Pasta or rice?
Oh, pasta these days. I was always a rice eater when I was racing, but these days it's definitely a bowl of pasta. How about you?
As a kid, my favourite dessert from Mum was rice pudding. Loved it.
I wasn't even thinking sweet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, got options, baby. Rice pudding was so good. Okay. Pineapple on pizza. Is it legal?
Not in Italy, it's not. These are Giro inspired questions, Matt. I think it's totally illegal.
Okay, what about for you personally?
No, don't touch it. How about you?
I pretend that I don't like it, and then when we have pizza, my son always orders a Hawaiian. I love that little bit of sweetness of the pineapple.
You always sneak a piece, do you?
Just sneak a piece. Okay. Next up, having Italian tifosi yelling your name in your ear on the Stelvio, or smelling fries and beer on the Koppenberg?
I'll take the Koppenberg because it's over a heck of a lot quicker than the Stelvio.
That's a pretty good answer.
And you?
I want to tick the Stelvio off. Yeah, I'd love to.
Have you ridden the Stelvio?
No, I haven't. So that's why I'm going with the Stelvio. I've ridden the Koppenberg, but I've never ridden the Stelvio. Tell me about it.
It's spectacular. It's amazing.
Okay.
Yeah. You could be riding up there, next week. No racing on anything whatsoever. There's still a crowd at the summit.
Yeah.
The Stelvio is simply an incredible ride. One you must tick off.
Okay. All right. Now Tour de France inspired questions. Cheese or dessert?
Oh, dessert.
Yeah. Well, you heard my rice answer. That
Yes.
was like the main meal, and I turned it into a dessert straight away. I'm a sweet tooth.
Yeah. Well, I'm not such a sweet tooth, but I'll go dessert over cheese because for me, cheese comes before the meal.
That's a cultural thing, isn't it, in Australia?
Very much so.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What would you rather have, Alaphilippe's panache or Dumoulin's class?
Or as a spectator, I'd rather have Alaphilippe's panache. As a rider, I'm a big fan of Tom Dumoulin. He's very calculated. He wins. He's very controlled. I've got a lot of respect for him.
I got a lot of respect for both of them, but if I could choose to live in the skin of one of them for a day, I'd go with Alaphilippe. I love the way he races. It is awesome. Dumoulin is sensational. What a motor. But Alaphilippe's panache every day of the week for me.
Yeah, he's amazing to watch, and he's a breath of fresh air for cycling. He's great for the French public. They love him. He really lights up the Tour de France. He has a huge fan base, so he is very exciting to watch.
Okay, now this is a question that's been written by a Frenchman, keep in mind. It's the 14th of July. You're in a breakaway with Thibaut Pinot. The stage finishes at the top of Mont Ventoux. You know you're going to wear the yellow jersey at the end of the stage. Do you attack at Chalet Reynard and fight for the win, or do you leave it to the Frenchman to win on Bastille Day?
Well, if I'm with Thibaut Pinot and the stage is at the top of Mont Ventoux and I'm going to finish in yellow jersey, I've obviously got a pretty good start on him on the GC because I think that Thibaut Pinot is going to put a fair chunk of time into me going up Mont Ventoux. But, when you're in a situation like that, you get the most collaboration where everybody gets something out of it. So I'll be saying, Thibaut, stage is yours. I'll take the jersey. Thanks.
You don't tell him a little fib, say, Thibaut, the stage is yours, and try and win the stage as well.
No, I could. You know what? I'd want to be on a pretty good day to beat Thibaut Pinot up a mountain finish anyway.
Oh, it's got to be pretty tempting though. On Mont Ventoux, what an iconic mountain! It's one of the great ones, isn't it?
It certainly is. Mont Ventoux is a spectacular climb. I only had the opportunity to race up Ventoux on a couple of occasions, but when you crest up there in the summit and it's all sort of barren, it's a pretty amazing feeling.
It's dramatic. Okay, Gero, that's all we've got time for today. But before the tour gets underway, you're going to be in Europe, and we're going to do a preview of the Tour de France. When do you leave?
I leave just in about 48 hours. I'm off to Europe, lining up over there in the international broadcast and the commentary team again. So I'll be on the ground. I look forward to doing our podcast, our preview for the tour from the ground in France.
I look forward to it. Thanks for listening to Cycling Insights, L'Etape Australia by Tour de France podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to us. Leave us a review and recommend us to your friends, please. It makes a big difference for the podcast. We'll see you on the road.